What is up, fellas? Another episode of the Blind Pig Podcast, courtesy of bgobsession.com. If you're new here, hook us up with a like, share, and a follow. If you've never listened to us, you can catch us on all major audio podcasting platforms, youtube.com, all major socials, and of course at the mothership, bgobsession.com. Totally free to sign up. Come join. There's a million things going on the board right now, one of which we'll kind of focus on today. It's kind of a topic of discussion this week as we head into free agency. But there's all kinds of draft prep conversation, different threads going on, different polls with the Commander brand, all of that. Before we get into the juice of the thing, I floated to John one thing. We unfortunately are now 2 consecutive weeks that we open the show or open the pod talking about mourning the passing of former Redskin and Tre Johnson. Old number 77 passed away this past week. 54 years old. When he retired from football, he became a history teacher in Bethesda. He was just a local guy, just kind of, a Washingtonian. He was here forever. And again, that guy, he didn't do a ton on the field, but he was one of those guys that we had a lot of belief in. I don't know about you guys, but I thought it was cool. And he had a very memorable moment where he accidentally punched a ref on top of his head and got ejected from the game in defense of Brad Johnson. So rest in peace, Tre Johnson. I don't know if you guys have any memories you want to talk about with him, but I figured we would at least give him a little tribute as we kick this thing off tonight.
Yeah, 54s, that's just way too young, man.
Yeah.
He is a second-round pick, end of the second round, played for 9 years. All but one season was with us. I think he was with us for 7 seasons. Then he went to Cleveland for a season, and we brought him right back. So his last season was in Washington. And I just remember the guy being a spark plug. He's like 6'2", 300 and I don't know how many pounds, but he was a big guy. And that was in football. I can't imagine, after he got done with football, he probably was an even bigger guy. But yeah, it's sad. And hopefully we're done with, the RIP thing in Washington football for a little bit here, because it's been between Sonny and who was it? Bruce Wilburn? Is that who it was? Who was the second guy that passed away?
Barry Wilburn.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And then now Tre Johnson. So yeah. Anyway, that's sad. It's like I said, that's just way too young.
Yeah, it's just too young, and he was a big, tough dude. I remember, he was fun to watch when he was here. And then also he had like a fun personality. Whenever he was in interviews or you see him on the sidelines, he's just like a fun dude. Mm-hmm. So yeah, this is just way too young.
Bob, you got any memories of Tre Johnson? No. Okay.
I just remember the guy being like the opinion. He would have fit right in the 80s, right? He felt like a throwback guy to the Hogs.
Yeah.
And honestly, one dude just showed he was like a road grader. No, sad times, man. I think John, my computer's giving me, but I think you mentioned this is like the third guy in less than a month. Tough time right now for the fan base.
It is. Well, boys, before one other thing I wanted to touch on, I thought it'd be cool to touch on. I don't know if you saw the graphic. I do know we kind of talked about it before the podcast kicked off, but Washington, the Commanders released another pretty cool graphic. I thought it was pretty wild. About the new stadium and the direction that they're going in, and I have to give them a lot of credit. I think I have to give them a lot of credit because they're not forgetting, a lot of things, and they're really working hard to maintain some of that connection. Let me know when it pops. There it goes. But the reflect the past, embrace the future. This is like the most recent graphic they show regarding the new stadium, and then in the reflection of the Anacostia River is the old RFK like mirror image. You know, the old concrete columns and the big lights and stuff. And I personally will say that I am thrilled with the new stadium. I think they're just knocking this thing out of the park. I hope they continue to ride this wave. And it's already been dubbed the Pringle, which is just give me all of that. You know what I mean? Just the fun shit to talk about our stadium. It makes it different than anybody else's, but I thought it was cool, and I think they're doing a good job.
Yeah, please don't call it the Pringle, man. That's just so. I hope that's not what we can come up with something better than that. Because you know what happens to Pringles, right? They get crunched. I'm just happy that they airbrushed out any turds that were floating down the Potomac, you know, when they were putting this graphic together.
Yeah, any bodies, they didn't put those in there.
Well, it is a Photoshop picture, so they could do whatever they want to do to clean it up. I don't think it's that green down there either, but that's just me personally. But
yeah, that's actually the Anacostia, right? That's not actually the Potomac. That's the Anacostia.
So, yep. A tributary into the Potomac. It precedes the Potomac, but I like it. I think it looks cool. I like that they're holding on to that. I think they're embracing it the right way. I think of all the fans and when we made this, when they were asking these questions, the fans wanted it for nostalgia purposes, and they are just feeding into that and just injecting everything into it to try to bring back that vibe. So kudos to them. I think, you know, I think that's cool looking. I think, and I hope they kind of run with that. But on to what we got together to talk about. One of the big threads on the board John actually instigated was one major question as we were all debating back and forth between draft prep and getting ready for free agency and all of these other things. And his very simple question was a poll. And what should be the priority? I think this is a multi-layered question. I don't think it's as easy as A and B, A, B, or C, because there's a lot that goes into it. But I am curious what you guys think is what should be the priority of the team and the highest of the highest focus.
So I scoped it. You know, we could have put every position on the team out there, but obviously we're set. We are actually set at a couple positions, even if it's only quarterback and punter. I don't know, but we are. You know, we have the offensive line is pretty well set, but the positions that I kind of put out there just to limit it, and people could only pick one. So because, you know, priority. Everyone wanted to pick a defensive player and an offensive player, but the positions I kind of made the assumption that we were most needing were cornerback, linebacker, wide receiver, tight end, running back, and guard, even though the O-line is in pretty good shape right now, but I do think we could use some guard help. So that was kind of the parameters of it. And I guess the other premise of it was, you know, that we're not going to, as bereft of talent as the defense appears to be, we're talking about probably totally revamping the defense. And we have some missing pieces on offense, which Adam Peters actually, you know, referred to in the end of season presser. He talked about how the best thing that they could do to protect Jaden is to get him some real weapons built, you know, add some weapons around him. So I know Adam Peters that's high on his list. But I think that main thing before you guys chime in, and then I'll wrap it up with what position I think we need to prioritize. But I think we got to keep in mind, man, we got a lot of free agency money. We do. We're not top in the NFL, but we're up there, probably top 3 or 4 in terms of salary cap dollars. And then we don't have all that many draft picks. Is it 5 or 6? Anyway,
I believe it's 6.
So we can't revamp the defense and get a bunch of explosive weapons all in one season. I just don't think it's possible. But I'd love to be proven wrong. So I think that's why the whole purpose of that thread was, since we can't do it all in one season, what's got to be the top priority? What position group? So I'll stop there, and you guys can kind of chime in with what you think. And if you don't agree with the ones that I picked, if there's some, if you think safety is the biggest priority, that's certainly fine. Just, do whatever you want to with it.
What you got, Tony?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are things to do in offense, obviously, but I think the biggest help on offense will just be healthy Jaden. That'll cheat code our offense and help elevate whoever's there. For me, I think it's on the defense. I actually think it's defensive line. I don't know specifically what position, but right now, to me, it feels like we have guys that are either like okay starters or like depth rotational guys. So I think we could use an upgrade on the front on the defense.
Hey Tony, I'm going to interrupt you for a second because I screwed up. Edge rusher was the first thing I wrote down out of that choice. So not that it has to be an edge rusher, but that is one of the options.
Yeah. So that's where I'm looking at. I think we need help there, just because even whether it's tackle or the edge, I think right now we need an influx of talent on that side of the ball.
What about you, Bob? What do you think, brother?
I've been pretty vocal about edge for, since we started toying with the draft after we figured out that the season really wasn't going to go anywhere. I think the draft came up in nearly every pod from the middle of the season on at some point in time. And I have been beating the drum for an edge rusher. What I will say is that if one of the two consensus first round pick edge rushers, Bain or Bailey, isn't there, in a more general sense, I think we've got to have a difference maker on defense. We've got to have a Jaden Daniels type on defense, and I don't care who it is, as long as he's a guy that gives our new defensive coordinator options and becomes something of a force multiplier in some way, shape, or form, whether that's Arvell Reese, whether that's Styles, whether that's Downs. I really don't care. I would personally, if you hold my feet to the fire, if the guy's there, the one I probably want the most is Baines. But absolutely, I am on the edge bandwagon, and I have been for quite a while. I look at the embarrassment of riches in New York and Philadelphia, and the way those guys get after the quarterback, and I'm just flat jealous every single damn week.
Yeah, I think I have to go with Bob. I put edge rusher. Obviously, I think everybody would argue. Personally, I think you have a quarterback on offense. You have a guy that can get the quarterback on defense. Those two kind of things are force multipliers. They change the entire dynamic of everything behind them or in front of them, whether you're talking offensively or defensively. But I am gonna say something. I voted edge. I think it should be our highest priority, but I also don't think that we'll actually have the opportunity to address it the way that we should. So it's like a multi-dimensional conversation. I don't think, to your point, Bob, I don't know that Bain and Bailey are going to be there, and what I don't want to do is go with the next best edge guy and pass over on somebody else who's better. So if you're telling me that everybody has an even grade across the board, and I think which one we need to address should be the most important, it's edge. If we had our pick of the litter, it would be the best edge player that we could get that's elite. But I don't know that we're going to be able to find that this offseason. So to your point, difference maker on defense, and we're picking top 7. We're going in with the highest salary cap one of the highest salary caps in the league. At a minimum, we need somebody on the other side of the ball that the offense has to account for.
Yeah.
Somebody that changes offensive play calling. Somebody that makes the quarterback stand up and identify, before the play. Not because it's a positive for them, but because it's a negative. So I would love for that to be an edge rusher. I think that's the most important position on the defensive side of the ball, but I think there's a lot of time left. And not all the pieces are going to fall into place in one offseason, to John's point. And it might have nothing to do with us or who we target. It would just might mean that those dogs aren't available when we're trying to get there, or they decide that they'd rather play in LA instead of Washington because it doesn't snow there. I don't know. There's a lot of factors, but yeah. Give me some of that.
So as usual, I'm gonna be off on my own with a totally different take, and I do think we actually have some pass rushers with some talent. Like Dorrance Armstrong before he got hurt was having a really good season. I don't think
That's true.
I don't think the cupboard is as bare as people talk about it, but you're right. We don't have that guy, unless, we put Von Miller in the hot tub time machine and, put it, get it, the version of him from 4 or 5 years ago. We just don't have that guy that offensive coordinators have to scheme against. You're right about that. But I think wide receiver is the biggest priority. And that might seem weird to say, because you could look at 2024 when we took when Jaden and that guy Cliff Kingsbury took the league by storm and had one of the most electric offenses that we've had in a long time. And let's be honest, the defense sucked in 2024 too, but we were so good on offense. And then we had that gambling style, whether that was Kingsbury or Quinn. I think Quinn had a lot to do with that. Kind of a what do we have to lose mentality, go for it. As Rocky said, go for it. We had that mentality. So you could look at that season and say, well, that we didn't have great wide receivers that year either. So why would we want to make wide receiver the top priority? But a couple things about that argument. One, there was no film on that Cliff Kingsbury offense with Jaden Daniels. There was no film on Jaden Daniels, and he turned out to be probably the best rookie quarterback in NFL history, I think. So it didn't matter that we didn't have great wide receivers, but we did have better wide receivers. We had, Olamide Zacchaeus had a really good year. Noah Brown actually was on the field for a little bit. We had, so we had some, and we had a happy, content Terry McLaurin who was healthy all year. So I think that masked a lot of our issue, which is we really don't have a number 2 wide receiver. I like Deebo Samuels a lot.
Probably hold on, John. Before you move on, Zach Ertz was our number 2 receiver. Like he was.
Oh yeah.
In 24, and then on top of that, we had guys like Jamison Crowder was our 5th guy. You know what I mean? So to your point, it was a much.
And if I could name two priorities, it would be wide receiver and tight end. So I agree. A pass catching tight end, but anyway, I guess where I'm going with all that is, we saw what happened last season, and our offense, it wasn't terrible, but we really were hamstrung. It couldn't be productive enough to overcome the shitty defense that we had on the field and Joe Witt Jr. and what he was doing. So we got to get back to having, I don't want to have a shitty defense. Don't get me wrong. I'd like to have a really good defense. And then Jaden doesn't have to be Superman every game. But we really got to find a bookend for Terry. I think if we had a true number 1/number 2 opposite Terry McLaurin, and we have Deebo Samuels, if we can get him back in the fold, that would be a pretty exciting, situation to have. So I just think if we don't find a number two, and I like Jalen Lane, but there's a reason why we drafted him where we did, which is I don't think he's ever going to be a number one or number two wide receiver. I liked Burks, what he showed last season, but I probably have more hope in Burks developing into that guy than I do Jalen Lane. But anyway, I just feel like until we have that number two guy, a legit number two, who's maybe even a number one, and Terry becomes a number two, then we're gonna see defenses do what they did in 2025, which is they're just gonna load up the box, dare us to run, and not be worried about the passing game like they would if we had some legit targets. And I think the longer we go without having some really good wide receivers, it just kind of holds Jaden back in his development. And you could see it last season. He didn't want to let the ball go. And there's only one reason why you don't want to let the ball go, because quarterbacks want to let the ball go, especially, young quarterbacks. He didn't trust the receivers. And the receivers were not open a lot of the time. I heard an interesting thing on Galdi's show this morning. He talked about even McLaurin. McLaurin is like almost bottom of the league in terms of separation. I don't know if you guys have seen that stat, but they actually track separation, the ability to separate, and it's not good. So I think I love Terry, don't get me wrong, but they were talking about why does he only get 7 chances a game? That's over his career. He's averaged 7 passing, downs per game. Well, it's one explanation might be just not getting separation. And I don't think he's that kind of dominant guy where he can just beat anybody. I think it takes him some time and some, that's just kind of who he is. I don't think he's like an elite wide receiver. I think he's a really, really good, hardworking, talented wide receiver. But anyway, I'm talking a lot. I think a bookend that's really a top tier guy opposite Terry, that would change the whole thing on offense, and that's where I want to see us go. At the most, that would be the first thing I would try to do. Obviously, we got a lot of things we got to do.
So, John, I was just looking back, and I don't think you're that far off base. And I don't know. I looked at it in 2024 in the regular season. Washington, we averaged 28.5 points per game. Our opponents averaged 23 points per game. In 2024-5, we averaged 20.9 points per game, and our opponents averaged 26.5. So what that tells me is, obviously, if we are stalling and if we're scoring over a touchdown less per game, that's dramatically different drives. That's dramatically different time of possession. That's dramatically different philosophy on the other side of the ball. I mean, you're changing the dynamic of things. So I'm not going to argue against it, because I do believe, and I would almost argue expand it to offensive playmaker, and I know that's a cop-out, but somebody else that can threaten the defense. I mean, if we had a legitimate number 2 receiver and a healthy Terry McLaurin and a healthy Deebo Samuel that's not being asked to do
everything,
a number 2, the number 1
right.
receiver. I mean, and you a healthy tight end that isn't 35 years old. I love Zach Ertz, and he was also good for a couple things. He was good for no rack. He was good for 1 boneheaded play per game. He was good for 1 really bad drop per game. And I'm not piling on the guy, but I mean, if you have like a legitimate tight end, you know what I mean? A lot of that could go away. Could you find 9 more points per game in this offense? And I think that the answer to that question is yes. And then how dynamic is the difference of this team versus what we saw in 2025, and a healthy Jaden at that.
So yeah. I think it was K-Dog that said, go ahead, Tony, and I'll get around to K-Dog when you're done.
I was going to say, sometimes I think it's not that deep. Jaden was hurt and not available much. Terry was barely available. Every other wide receiver got hurt during the season. Eckler was out. Like everyone was hurt. I think sometimes that's like the biggest factor to me. We didn't have our best player, and then everyone else got hurt too. So
yeah, you're not wrong about that. It is hard to judge, and I think that's why there's such wide disparity. Yeah. There's no consensus in the fan base now because it's like, and I think Derek said this. It's like, do you believe 2024 or do you believe 2025? And with all the caveats that you just listed of all the injuries, and you kind of have to believe. But I think if you're a smart fan, you have to believe both. It's like they both happened. There were reasons. All the reasons for 2024. Some of them were things like luck. We went for it like a record amount of times on fourth down. Well, that could have blown up in our face, but it didn't. So, and then 2025, you can kind of poo-poo it, or you can say the sky is falling, depending on, whether you're a glass half full kind of guy or not.
Well, and I think understanding that changes the priority. If like we literally signed Preston Smith off the street to come in here and play defensive end for us in meaningful time. Mm-hmm. So, to your point, John, is if our defensive line is completely healthy, all the way from Dietrich Wise, Dorrance Armstrong, Javonte Jean-Baptiste, all of these guys, like, does that change the panic button that people have with the edge defender? And
I guess one of the reasons why I'm so fixated on wide receiver is, tell me who are legit number two. Forget everyone's healthy. Let's grant that everyone comes in healthy. Who's our number two? We don't have one, guys. I'm sorry, but we don't. But if you want to throw a name out there, go ahead. Is it McCaffrey? Is it Jalen Lane? Is it? Please, for God's sake, don't say Noah Brown, because the guy can't stay on the field for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't think forget like depth, like the third, fourth, fifth, sixth wide receiver. We don't have a legit number two wide receiver. That's bad. I mean, that's just not sustainable for an NFL offense, I don't think. So I just feel like they got to do something. And I guess the other conversation that came up that I wanted to give K-Dog, who, is is he a high school football coach?
Yeah.
Really smart guy. And he was making the case that a dynamic running back was the bigger priority. And I heard a rumor that, I guess Kenneth Walker Jr. the Seahawks are not going to tag him. I believe I read that earlier that, so that's a guy that is out there possibly available. There's some other good running backs available in free agency, and who knows about the draft, but I mean, I think that could be another possibility, but I don't put it up there with wide receiver.
So let me I don't know, play a little devil's advocate, because K-Dog and I had a little back and forth about this, offense versus defense. And I understand his point about running back. I really do. I also understand your point about wide receiver. I think you can make the argument right now that the 5 best players on this team are on offense. Even if, I don't know. I don't even know who would be in that conversation on the defensive side of the ball. Maybe Frankie Louvu, maybe Trey Amos, right? Amos was having a very good season prior to breaking his leg as a rookie. Maybe they're in that conversation to be one of the top 5, top 6 players in the on this team. But when you look at the team and one of the guys in your top 10 is your punter, and I'm dead serious about that. Tressway is absolutely one of the top 10 players on this team right now, largely because he's got sure hands for every hold that he does for whoever's kicking the football, as well as being able to drop the ball almost wherever he wants to be able to put it. I mean, he's one of the best in the league at that. But you stop and look at this, and I'm not saying that the cupboard is bare, John. It's not. Dorrance Armstrong was having a very strong season, but I guarantee you Dorrance Armstrong does not keep Dak Prescott
No, you're right.
or Jalen Hurts up at night. Dorrance Armstrong isn't forcing any offensive coordinator in this league to rearrange his blocking scheme. And I look at the difference in the Philadelphia defense when Carter was in versus when Carter was out late in the season. And that's what I see with our defense, right? We're missing that guy that on any given play has to actually every single play has to be accounted for by the offensive coordinator in the scheme and the quarterback in terms of where is he when you come to the line of scrimmage. That's the one guy you have to identify. Where is he and what's he's doing? And we just don't have it on defense. I understand all the arguments about the offensive weapons. I think there is some tremendous talent available on the free agent market and wide receiver. You look at a couple of the guys that have been cut in just the last couple of days, a couple of big names there. And look at the guys that are probably going to make the market from other teams. And we're going to talk about that in a couple of weeks. So I don't want to get too deep in the names, but there's some real possibilities in terms of bringing in some free agents there. And they're not necessarily guys that are going to demand, they're going to be expensive. Don't get me wrong, but they're not going to demand $30 million a year the way Terry McLaurin did last year. And I mean, I think we can get there. And I'll be honest, maybe I am a ridiculous optimist, but I think with a full off season with the team, if we bring Treylon Burks back with a full offense with the team or off season with this team and a chance to work with Jaden in the off season, he at the very least can be a number 2 and potentially be the guy he was drafted to be in Tennessee. Maybe. I mean, he's never played a full season, and you got to admit the Tennessee coaching staff wasn't exactly the greatest in the known world.
I like him, Bob, but I think I don't think we know what a number 2 looks like because we haven't had one since I don't know when the last time we had two top tier wide receivers.
Pierre Garcon and Deshaun Jackson.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's fair. That's absolutely fair.
That's what I worry about is that's what we're thinking because I mean he played he showed some good stuff Burks did, but I mean I don't know, man. I think that's a big gamble.
I don't think they're banking on it.
I'm not suggesting that should be the only place we put our eggs. That's not the only basket I want to put our eggs in. I think we've got to bring somebody in free agency. Whether that's, I don't know, Brandon Ayuk, the basket case, or doubts from Green Bay, or maybe we do something crazy and sign Terrell, right? I don't know, but I think we bring somebody in free agency, and I would be willing to bet you that we spend a draft pick, on this. I think a lot of it depends on what they felt like they were potentially getting out of Lane and
McCaffrey,
right? I mean, McCaffrey was really beginning to look like maybe a viable NFL slot guy just about the time he got hurt. But do you want your number 2 to be playing out of the slot? I don't know. Maybe you don't care as long as I mean, for the longest time, the number 2 guy, the number 2 wide receiver in New England was the guy playing in the slot, and they had Randy Moss out there on the edge, right? Granted, McLaurin is not Moss. I think the other thing we're not thinking about here is we're going to change offensive philosophies. And I would be willing to bet you that Blau is going to run the ball a whole lot more than Cliff did. And if we're running the ball a whole lot more, that's going to suck the defense up close to the line of scrimmage, and that's going to give some of these guys a bit more space to operate in the secondary. But that's just me.
Well, I think the other thing too is we don't know what the team's thinking about Debo, and we don't know what Debo's thinking about Debo.
Mm-hmm.
Is he going to sign is he going to give us some home cooking and, not ask for a ridiculous amount of money to come back and do they want him back? I assume since, I mean, he was kind of like plugged in to be the savior last season because there was nobody else to do it. But so if we don't re-sign Debo, then that really it just turns the burner up even more at that position. So
it may depend on what other teams are offering too, John. I mean, Debo, it may not be a case of having to accept home cooking, or it might be a case of having to accept a little home cooking because nobody's offering him somewhere else, right? If Washington's willing to pay him 15 to 18 and nobody else in the league is willing to go above 13 or 14, what do you do? Well, you come back to Washington. Even what you really wanted was 20. So,
So I just wanted to throw out there, we did not mention cornerback or linebacker. Nobody mentioned those two positions. So I'm just curious because I think you could make
as a top priority, though. I don't think that's a top I don't think either one's a top priority because I think we all agree.
Why not?
I would, in my personal opinion, I think our defensive scheme was a lot of the shortfall. I think we have a lot to believe in Amos. We have a lot to believe in Sainer still, and we have to believe that the right coaches are going to be brought in to elevate their play. If we're going to live our life believing that we're going to have shit coaches and we just need to have elite talent at every position to overcome terrible scheme, I mean, why are you even rooting for football at that point? Like, so I'm not going to sit here and act like we have premium or the best, but I do think that the secondary is going to be better. And I think to that point, it's a chain reaction. If Bob and I said edge, and I think Tony said edge too, but I think we say edge because that makes the secondary better. When you've got that dominating force, it speeds up the time, the clock. It speeds up the offense. It changes the way that you can play the game. As far as linebacker goes, I think we're all somewhat comfortable with Jordan McGee and Frankie Louvu being on the field. And we don't really know if we're going to run 2 or 3 linebacker sets or where it's going to go from there. But I don't know. And before we move totally on, I do want to put a caveat. I do want to mention, you said top priority, and I think a lot of people then focus on the first pick in the draft or the largest financial investment in free agency. And I don't think that those two things have to be connected because, one, I don't think there's going to be an edge rusher in free agency that's going to be able to come in here and do what we are asking him to do. Right. I don't know that guy's going to be able to be had in the draft. So there can be almost a negotiation there where you get like a guy like Joseph Asai or somebody like that who comes in and is an upgraded edge, but they're not a premium edge. Like, he's not going to be Myles Garrett, but Myles Garrett's not available for a reason because he's Myles Garrett, right? Like, it was going on the board where Bradley Chubb, and somebody went back and looked at Bradley Chubb's tape against Tunsil, and my argument was, well, nobody really looks good against Tunsil, so you can't. We're not asking. I'm not bringing in a dominant player because those guys don't just show up out there. They're just not readily available. So I think that we do need to kind of separate a priority versus
what
a
you're
large
saying,
investment.
I think what you're alluding to is, and other guys brought this up as well in that thread, is you can't go best player available when you say we have to draft a wide receiver with the number 7 pick. You didn't.
Correct.
I mean, that would be, so, and that's a really good point to make, is it's not either or. I mean, you got to balance.
I very well believe that edge rusher might be the top priority and wide receiver might be the second priority, but we take Jeremiah Love, and I'm happy with it because that guy's a difference maker. So but I still think, to your point, we need to address wide receiver. I still think we need to address edge. I still think we need to address positions like linebacker. I don't know about corner. I think we'll probably get some depth there, but I don't know that they need to be the top priority.
I just wanted to say two things about the cornerback and linebacker. We don't know that if San Ristel can be that second bookend to Amos. I don't think we know that. They might know it. The team, I mean, I bet the coaches probably have an opinion about that. But he looked extremely shaky at times last year. Maybe it was Joe Witt Jr. in the scheme, or maybe he's just not as good as we thought he was after a pretty good rookie year. It's weird that we brought him in to be the slot. Reportedly, that was his thing, and he can't play the slot. So I don't know. But anyway, I'm not writing him off. I like Sam Bristol. I saw he definitely brought some doubt into the equation in 2025 that wasn't there after his rookie season. And then the only other thing I wanted to mention about linebacker is, I mean, how many seasons are we going to trot Bobby Wagner out there when he's clearly like lost the step? He's still he's a coach of that defense on the field. So you mentioned Luvu and Jordan McGee. I don't think either one of those guys are going to be the coach of the defense. So who is? And that was where I was going with. You could argue if, let's say, he doesn't come back. I don't know if that's for sure he's coming back, Wagner, or not. But let's just say he doesn't come back, or he, gets hurt, whatever it is. Now we're kind of in a situation where we just don't have that guy that can really be the on the field coordinator of the defense, like Wagner currently is. So anyway, not to overstate it, but.
Yeah, but I don't think you're going to bring in a rookie to be that guy either.
Well, we're not just talking about the draft. We're talking about everything.
Right? No. Yeah. No, I get that. I don't know.
But again, what team's going to let that guy go? As Derek said, that's
right.
Yeah,
they were, and all the signs point to McGee being the guy they were grooming to play that position. Now, I don't know whether he's got it or not. And here's the thing. We've now changed defensive staffs and defensive schemes. Is McGee going to be that guy? Could McGee be that guy in Durante's scheme as opposed to a Whit Quinn type of a scheme? And the answer is, I have no clue.
Well, Bob, you brought it up on on this podcast that Jordan McGee silently found his way to being our sixth leading tackler in and he was running 30,
and that was on limited
35% of the snaps or something.
Reps too.
Yeah. I mean, he basically played less than half the snaps Bobby Wagner did, and was still 5th or 6th on the team in terms of total stops. So,
of course, tackles doesn't dictate the green dot, but
no,
it does.
No, it
does give you a window of ability.
Yeah.
Nobody voted guard, by the way.
so the answer to that question is
Yeah. Long snapper.
How do you guys feel about tight end? Just because we haven't talked about that, not really. How do you feel like? How are we set at tight end? Assuming Ertz doesn't come back. Well, hell, I don't care if you talk about Ertz or not.
Well, here's the thing. At the very least, Ertz won't be back for the first 5, 6, 7 games of the season.
Yeah.
I mean, at the very least, he's going to miss the front half of the season. That's kind of what happened with Cosme. He missed the first 5 games of the year. And he blew his ACL out about the same point in the season that Ertz had his problem.
Well, Cosme was also 27.
Right. I am working from the assumption that Ertz is done. I think Ertz is probably baked, right? Sad way to go out. I don't think anybody can argue with that. And I appreciate the 2 years we got from the guy. Truly, I do. Here's my thing. All Ben Sennett did was catch every ball they threw at him. That's all he did. He's got more than that. Granted, it's not a lot.
Not much more than that.
Over the course of 2 years, he's got he's got like 15 targets and 14 receptions or something. But the point is, how do you know what the guy can do when you're not throwing the football at him? And
did you hear what David Blau said about him? He was asked about Ben Sennett.
No, I didn't. I did not. What did he say?
He's got a lot of work to do.
No, hold on. Time out. He said Sennett is progressing, but he's still got a long way to go, is Zach's words.
Okay. All right. That makes me feel so much better.
I'm not saying it, But to the point is that Sinnott was running at best third tight end reps in practice. Like to Bob's point, I think he's an incomplete at this point. I don't know that we can sit here and actively say that that he has been a failed experiment or he's been a success. If you want to argue he hasn't been successful, I'll agree, but I don't think you can say it's been a failure either. At best, John Bates is your blocker. Ertz was your number one receiving tight end. Sinnott was on the scout team.
And the other thing is that Sinnott himself said he and Zach are very different tight ends. Zach is very much a find the space in the zone, sit down and catch a ball. Whereas Sinnott is very much a catch a ball on the run kind of a guy. And I don't think we were scheming for a tight end that catches the ball on the run. I've also seen a couple of guys on the board. I've also seen a couple of guys on the board suggest that Sinnott might be better in more of a, I'll pull out some old names, right? Nick Giaquinto or Chris Cooley, kind of an almost H-back role. And that he could be brilliant on the move. And that's, I'm not sure I can argue with that. I think he might be able to play that kind of a role. Now, I don't know if Blau is going to have that kind of a role in his offense, and I don't think anybody else outside of the building in Ashburn knows that today either. And we probably won't even know until opening day, if you really want to know the truth. If the team is as savvy at all, we really won't know. But I don't know. I'm not trying to downplay tight end, but here's the thing. There isn't a tight end in this draft that I think is worth the number 7 pick. That's another thing, right? I don't want to reach for a guy at number 7 that should be drafted at number 20. My God, how many times have we done that in the last 10 years? And how
Bob, you brought it back to my point. Bob, you brought it back to my point. Everybody's taking highest priority and immediately putting a parallel line to either the most money spent or the highest draft pick available. And I don't know that that's the thing. We could take a third round tight end and that could quote unquote solve the problem, right? Like,
I'd like to point out George Kittle was a third round pick.
Oh, a lot of them are,
arguably the best tight end in the league, right? And here's the other thing. I mean, there's talk that Pitts might actually reach the free agent market. I don't know if you want.
I don't want to pay Pitts what Pitts is going to get on the market.
I don't know about Pitts.
I'm sorry. This is going to be an unpopular opinion, maybe, but Daron Payne 2.0. When the money's on the line, the guy gets the bag. But the rest of his career, you see nothing. You don't see it.
Underwhelming guy. So I'm not.
I think it also highlights something. A lot of people talk about how, and we talk about it on the board, about how there's so many quote unquote needs, and I would almost argue the opposite point. There are so many positions that you could go into next year, and there's room for improvement, but you don't feel like it's a liability. Tight end is one of them. I don't know that you would go into next year. If we went into next year with Bates, Yankoff, and Sinnott, no, you wouldn't be the happiest of anybody. But it's not like you're looking at a completely inept in a squad.
What would inept be? What would inept be? Like one of them? Do they have to be amputees? I mean, I don't.
Oh my God, they're not that bad, John.
Which of the? Derek, I'm just going to challenge you on that. That's a homeristic viewpoint, man, because none of those guys are reliable pass catching tight ends. None of them.
Okay, but that's you brought up the point.
John Bates in the red zone. Or freaking Ben Sinnott or any of it.
Okay, but you kind of brought up the point is that you can scheme away from needing your tight end to be a primary pass catcher. That is something that you can work within an offense to the point where you don't depend on your tight end as being a receiving threat. I'm not saying you have a tight end that is a receiving threat. It is absolutely beneficial, but it's not a necessity. You look at our wide receiving core. Yeah, I would agree with you that needs to get, and they will address it, but it doesn't need a number one wide receiver, like to the point where we're running some of the wide receivers that this team has run out in the past has been just completely inept. The running back room is another one.
You guys brought up the fact that how important Zach Ertz was in 2024 and how big a part he was of our offense.
No, I said he was the number 2 receiver. I didn't say he was I think that role can be filled by different people. I don't think it has to be a tight end.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying we don't have Zach Ertz anymore. And Jaden Daniels is a third-year quarterback who needs a reliable safety valve to go to. And Ben Sinnott ain't it right now. I'm just saying none of those guys are. So that's the only reason I'm being aggressive about it, because I think it's one of those things where we talk ourselves into being okay with what we got because it makes us feel better. But then we find out, it's pretty much what we thought we had, which is not enough. So I'm worn down. I'm worn down.
All right. So here's my question then, John. If you don't consider Sinnott to be reliable, what's your definition of reliable? Because all the dude does is catch the ball when it's thrown to him.
Oh, come on, Bob. I mean, we don't even have a statistic.
You can only play the team that's in front of you. Well, the same is true for the guys on the field. He can only catch the ball.
So, Bob, do you think these decisions happen in a vacuum? That they're like they think Ben Sinnott's the next, the next great pass catching tight end, but they're holding it back. I mean,
no. No, I don't think these things happen in a vacuum. However, we have all seen guys that have been miscast one place, go someplace else, and called a bust, and suddenly go somewhere else in a different scheme and light the world up. That is not an uncommon story in the NFL, right? And Sennett's got an opportunity this year to play in a different scheme. And we all know that Cliff Kingsbury had a hard-on for Zach Ertz. I mean, that's no secret either, right? And the offense was designed for what Ertz likes to do, not for what Sinnott likes to do. And I don't feel like we ever really saw anything run specifically for Sinnott. Now, Blau saying he's got some work to do. Hey, all right, fine. I'm perfectly willing to and understand. I'm not saying that tight end is not a need. I'm not saying that.
That was my point too. I didn't.
Right. And I'm not going to be upset if they draft a tight end in the 3rd round or they draft a tight end in the 5th round. I'm certainly not going to be upset about that. However, I'll tell you what, I'm going to be pretty lit up if they reach for a tight end at number 7. And I think everybody on this pod should be, because you should be getting a game changer, and no one is projecting anybody in this tight end class to be a game changer. There is no Kyle Pitts in this tight end class, according to anybody. There's no Kellen Winslow. There's no Gronkowski. And so
I guess I think you're right about that. I just think there are probably free agent tight ends that immediately eclipse anything Ben Sinnott has shown he can do.
And that's very possible.
John, it comes back to my point. It's the separation of separate from number 7, separate from the highest free agent acquisition. What I mean? Like, we have to separate the priority away from that, because the tight end's never going to be the biggest free agent acquisition, and there isn't a tight end worth number 7. There's not a cornerback worth number 7 right now. There's not but there may be a running back worth number 7. There's arguably the conversation comes linebacker, edge, and wide receiver. I think those are the 3 big ones at number 7 right now that the most people are looking at. Nobody's asking us to draft an offensive lineman either, which is just an epiphany of all epiphanies. Like, holy shit, can you believe it?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, well, the other part of that is there could be a guy that falls to us, like the safety. Everyone's,
Caleb Downs,
might be the best player in the draft. If he's sitting there at 7, even if we don't think we need a safety desperately, that might be who we take. So you just don't know.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah,
and I think it comes like the.
So I don't know. I don't know if you guys have seen it. I found an interesting website that functions as an NFL mock draft database. It actually functions as a consensus for all of the mocks out there. They basically take all of the and feed them into a giant spreadsheet, I'm guessing, on the back end, and come up with the averages. Caleb Downs is currently the consensus number 10 pick across all the mock drafts in the league. Actually, wait, no, hang on, I'm wrong, because they actually have him. The consensus is that he's going at number 10 to Cincinnati. But as far as his rating is concerned, he's rated the number 8 player. Number 7 is Carnell Tate, wide receiver out of Ohio State. God, Ohio State's just loaded. Look at it. Geez. 4 of the top 12 players are all off the Ohio State team.
Oh, jeez.
Mm-hmm. I do like mock draft database. One thing I will say is that anybody can submit a mock draft, but it is a consensus. So, like, one idiot in Northern Virginia that sucks at drafting isn't going to skew the results enough to make a difference. But but it is and their simulator is really good. We've used it. I think we've used it on here when we've done our draft pod. But John, we're not beating you up, brother. We actually believe.
I mean, you know how I am. I'm some of the stuff I throw out there. It's just to get conversation.
I know.
Because if I didn't do that, we'd be like, okay, well, everyone wants an edge rusher.
Right. I think
another 46 minutes to fill.
I think the real question it answers is that we have a lot of opportunities for improvement, but I don't know that we have a lot of liability. Like, there's a lot of positions on this team that you can look at and you can say, if you make one move, you exponentially increase the value at that position. But I don't know that there's a lot of them you look at and say, if we don't come away with X, Y, and Z at this position, we're going to be in trouble, right? Like, do you see what? Does that make sense? I
just want us to be like Philadelphia, because I don't think we have been like Philadelphia in this way for a long time, if ever, where we look at guys and we say, we brought this guy in and it's not working out the way we thought it was going to work out. And they move on. They cut the guy, they release him. New England did a lot of that. I would just like to see us be more cutthroat and in that way.
Marshawn Lattimore. Sorry, what was that?
Yes, I mean, yeah. I mean, even with like Bobby Wagner, it's like Bobby Wagner's too slow to be out there now. That's how I feel. Just move on. Or whoever. I mean, it could be a number of people we could talk about, but I would just like us to.
You mean like Jahan Dotson, who they gave us a 3rd-round pick for? Who's going to be a free agent this offseason?
I was going to say he's a free agent. We can have him back if we want him.
Hey, John, I'm with you, but to that point, let's swing, right? They're swinging. They constantly swing. They take a guy like Jordan Davis, who's apparently a knucklehead, causing problems. And now he's an all-pro defensive tackle, and he looks like a stalwart for the next 10 years in that defense. He's a mainstay. So let's swing. Why don't we swing? And that brings up, we'll talk about it more. That's where you take Jeremiah Love at 7, even though everybody thinks you need a defensive player. But then you can get a guy who's an all-pro running back for 5 years of control. And you want to talk about take the pressure off Jaden Daniels and off the offensive line and off the tight end and off everybody else. Scare him with Saquon Barkley 2.0, basically.
Well, and to be fair, there was a lot of criticism when Detroit took Jahmyr Gibbs a few years ago. And Gibbs was arguably the single best running back in the league this last season. Better than Barkley, better than Robinson.
Bijan Robinson. Yeah.
It's crazy how the pendulum swings, man. It's like it is. Like that's been the narrative for the last 3 or 4 seasons is you don't draft a running back in the 1st round. The running back's not as important as they used to be.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
And then you go to the Super Bowl and you watch a team just pound it down the other team's throat.
I do want to say one thing. I've seen a lot of people arguing that we need to take a running back in the 1st round because the best thing we've got on the roster is Krosky Merritt. And he's a 7th-round draft pick. The only reason Krosky Merritt fell to the 7th round is because he didn't play his last year in Arizona. If the dude had played, the dude would have been a mid-round draft pick. He probably would have been a 3rd or 4th round pick, more than likely. I mean, that's what I've seen out there is that he very well could have gone maybe even as high as the second round if he'd had a good year. And
Yeah.
and so I'm tired of the draft position bias. And I guess this kind of goes back to what you were talking about with Philadelphia, John. If the guy doesn't work out, get rid of him. And that's one of the things that I loved about our front office the last year that Rivera was here. Middle of the season, they looked at Chase Young and went, he's not doing it. Let's get what we can get and get out from underneath the guy. And I greatly appreciate the fact that they did that. And the fact that Peters got out from underneath Jahan Dotson for a third, I thought that was brilliant. And I want to see us continue to do that type of thing. But at the same token, let's not pick on a guy because he was taken in the 7th round. We saw the guy hit a home run against the Cowboys. They don't have a great defense, but you know what they do have? A fast defense. And Krosky Merritt ran right away from everybody. I think the kids, it's not to say we can't improve, just like at tight end, right? We can always
wait till we see what he does when we have the distraction of a true number 1 wide receiver opposite Terry.
Look,
it's going to open up the whole running game.
Fair. You know what? And you're probably right.
Look, to your point, Bob, you don't take Jeremiah Love because Krosky Merritt is on your roster. You take Jeremiah Love because that guy changes your offense.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so if you take Jeremiah Love at 7, it's not because, well, we only have a 7th round. No.
It's the same reason you take the safety if he's sitting there. Is that guy?
Yeah, right. No matter what.
All on his
1,000%, because that is a dynamic. That's the kind of guy. Jeremiah Love's the kind of guy to keep defensive coordinators up at night. Caleb Downs is the kind of guy that offensive coordinators have to scheme for, or at least if you believe he is that guy.
Yes.
You might not believe he's the guy. Like, you know what I mean? Chase Young was supposed to be that guy. 32 teams believed he was that guy, and he wasn't.
Yeah.
So if you're convinced he is that guy, you take him outside of quarterback right now because we have Jaden. You don't take another quarterback. Long snapper, punter, or kicker. If there's another position that guy dynamically changes your team and that guy changes the entire outcome of what the defensive or offensive team is doing, you take that guy and you just run with it regardless of what you already have.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway.
At 7, you just you're right. At 7, you just got to go with the high impact guy that's going to be dynamic on your team regardless of the position, with those caveats as you mentioned.
So next week we actually get down into starting to break down free agency, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
We've got some position groups that we're still debating about who's taking what. Right over his head. But we'll be breaking it down by position group. Free agency, I think we're going to start next week will be offense. The week after that will be defense. And then the week after that, we might run. I'm still trying to convince the boys to run a Tuesday night podcast that week because March 9th is the opening of the legal tampering period. So we could be reporting in real time the signings that evening while we're on the Blind Pig podcast, reacting to what we have done because the league year or the legal tampering period starts at 4:00 that day. And we usually kick off at 8:30. So 4.5 hours in, we could be reacting, we could be reporting, we could be talking about how things are going in real time. So if you all have made it this far, it's all love. We laughed, and John and I were talking about how this could be a really short one, and we've gone like
an hour and
I don't even know.
Most of that was John talking about wide receiver. So
hey, don't.
Yeah, if you got this far, somebody tell me you put a stopwatch on John talking about wide receiver because
this
like
guy.
40 minutes or so, right?
Well, the alternative is I could talk about my workouts and share pictures. So I figured you'd rather.
No, don't do that. Don't do it. Keep your shirt on, Boone. Keep your shirt on, sir. But as always, boys, if you made it this far, hook us up with a like, a share, and a follow. Catch us on all major audio podcasting platforms, youtube.com, all major socials. And please come hang out at bgobsession.com. Totally free to join, get into discussion, old school forum style conversation. And as always, the pigs are out.